Okay, and I didn't realize that I had gotten almost out of the range of the camera from earlier. It's hard for me to look up and see where the phone is actually filming at versus what I'm doing. So, sorry about that. But I'm just going to, while this is dry enough that I can handle it, I'm going to just pounce in some clouds. And I don't fuss too much with doing this. And it's just so that there's enough there that when the viewer looks at it, they know it's a cloud. So I'm not trying to actually paint a perfect cloud. Just enough to be clouds in my sky. So now I'm going to paint the little barns. And I do these very randomly. And when I say that, I just kind of brush mix whatever color I want the barn to be and some white paint. And then do a dragging motion with the loaded brush to hopefully kind of simulate, old barn wood. So that's what I'm after when I do this. And then sometimes I like to turn the wood on the side of the barn and do it sideways just to create a little dimension or help with the dimension that you're trying to create within the painting. And I'll change up the colors as I work on the different ones. Here I picked up just a little bit of black and added to the color just to make this particular barn just a little different, have a little different flavor in the coloring. And that pretty much is it. That's two little barns base coated in. So not a whole lot of anything fancy to get them there. Then see if I can hold this and not make a mess of it. This is how I do the little roof. I use a color called raw sienna. It's just a color that I like, and it reminds me of old rusty tin. So it's just what I started doing to make my little barn roofs with years ago, and I have done them the same way ever since. You don't really see a whole lot of that side, so I just sort of dab on what would be like a little edge there. And I get enough color on there that it makes it opaque and doesn't have any, I want it to have depth to it with the color. So sometimes I have to go back and add 2 coats, letting the first one actually dry completely. I want to do this little edge right here. And I think that one's going to need to dry and have two coats on it. Don't think this one's going to scrub off. Let's see. See if this brush will remove it. I should have wiped it off while it was still wet. Yeah. took it off with no problem. So this one's still not quite dry enough. Now I'm going to take another angle brush, and this is the one that I use more for detail work, so I don't use it for scrubbing into the surfaces. And I'm going to do a little blending. So I've got just a little piece of freezer paper to use as palette paper. And I'm going to put the shadows. And I jump around and do this so that I'm not ever overstroking one of the sections that's not quite dry yet. So that's the reason for doing the different areas. And now for this particular side-loaded float here, I'm just using water on the brush because it's such a small area. But if I was doing this on a canvas or a larger surface, then I would probably use the floating medium. But the water suffices just fine for such small areas. So on the darker barn, I used the black, and then on the barn that has more of a brown look to it, I'm using burnt umber with, I think I put out a little bit of asphaltum. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure what other color I put out. I use a rather limited palette and then do a lot of just brush mixing with the colors to create the different looks that I want. Let me go back around here to the more black of the two barns. Let's see if we can finish giving it its little shadow areas. When I work in some of those little small spaces, I kind of have to hold my breath. So that's the reason I don't usually talk when I'm working with a lot of the detail. Okay, and then I'm going to, as I call it, set the barn down by shading completely across the bottom. And you'll notice I haven't painted like the barn door, the window openings yet, because I want to make sure that I have all of this just like I want it. Then I'll go back and add those elements in. So let's do the floated edge on the bottom of this one. And then it's going to have another coat on the roof because it's just not as opaque as I want it to be. So I'm going to, and I don't worry about that little side piece as much as I do the main body of the roof. This one, I think I'll add just a little bit more. That one's good enough. Okay, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll come back and show some more.